In this episode of Beyond at Home, we're going to look at what Coke has to do with how we can be for our local community. Now, here's something you might not know about Coca-Cola, is that their goal is to have a Coke within arm's reach of every single person in the world. That is absolutely outrageous. It's also the second most recognizable symbol in the world. And you might ask yourself, well, what's the most recognizable symbol in the world? The cross. Now, where Jesus and Coke intersect is that Coke would never look at the world and say, you know what? I think there's enough people that have sugar water in their hands. We don't really need to reach any more people. But so often, and maybe you've been one of these people, or maybe you've been part of a church like this, we can get to a part as a local church where we go, you know what? We've kind of reached a lot of people. We've kind of done a lot of stuff. And here's the reality, and here's what we can learn from Coke. Coke doesn't focus on their success. Coke doesn't focus on the things they've done well. They look at their potential. And that's a reality for us as a local church, that God has not blessed us with success, but He's blessed us with potential. Now, it's raining, but Beyond at Home doesn't stop for anyone. And in this episode, I want to look at this idea of how do we embrace the potential that God has for us as a local church? Now, in the last episode, and if you haven't seen that, go back and check it out. And we asked this question, what do we want to be known for? And we looked at the idea that for so many people, they know what the church is against, but they don't know what the church is for. And as we wrap this series up, I want to talk about one way that we can specifically be for Moreton, be for our community. One of the reasons that people don't engage with church is because they've said no to the church. And so I want to explore the mindset that we need to take as a local church that needs to shift in order to say yes to people who have said no to Jesus, said no to the local church, and said no to what we believe. And the good news is that we get a really big insight into what that mind shift needs to be from Jesus Himself. And we get this insight on a day that Jesus is walking into Jericho. On a much nicer day than this, the sun is out, there's crowds around Him from every single side. And there's a tax collector called Zacchaeus. Now, what you need to know about tax collectors is that tax collectors were Jewish people who worked for the Roman government. Because at this point in time, Jericho would have been under Roman occupation. So they weren't really well favored by their own people because they were seen to be working for the enemy. And they weren't really well favored by the Romans because they were seen to be the people that they were occupying. But Zacchaeus, he was actually a tax collector of a region. So he would have had a whole bunch of other tax collectors reporting to him. And how tax collectors made their money? Well, they skimped off the top and charged everyone else extra tax. And so Zacchaeus was incredibly wealthy and incredibly rich because he'd stolen from his own people. And Zacchaeus, he wants to meet Jesus. And so he climbs up this tree, and as Jesus is walking through the town and there's crowds everywhere, he sees this guy in a tree and he just thinks to himself, that is so odd. And so he goes, "Oi, you, Zacchaeus, I want to come to your house and I want to have a conversation with you." And everyone was displeased. And sometimes I almost think that that's the way the church can be at times. That we think to ourselves, well, why would we say yes to people like that? Why would we engage with people like that? And Jesus is sitting there going, they're the people you need to be engaging with. And Jesus didn't care what the religious people thought. He said, "Hey, Zacchaeus, I want to come eat with you." And as they're going through this conversation, Zacchaeus ends up putting his faith in Jesus. Zacchaeus goes back and repays everyone the money he's ever stolen. In fact, he repays it 4 times to people that he's stolen from. And then Jesus details and explains exactly what his mission is. And Jesus says, the Son of Man, which is a reference to himself, came to seek and save the lost. Now, let me just clarify what Jesus meant by lost, because effectively what he meant was people who had said no to God, people who had said no to church, people who had said no to faith. Jesus said, hey, my mission is to say yes to people who have said no to me. And as a local church, we want to say yes to people who have said no to Jesus as well. We want to say yes to people who have said no to what we believe, said no to church, said no to engaging in any single way. And one of the ways that we do that is that we push back against insider thinking. Take Coke, for example. Coke would never say, well, we've reached enough people. Well, we've done a good job. But so often the local church can say things like, well, we've got 2 services going. Well, we've got a lot of group environments going. And we need to resist that type of insider thinking. Now, if you're a Jesus follower, I know that you might be thinking to yourself, well, but hang on, Chris, like what about me? Where am I in all of that? And here's what I would say to you, because I've had so many conversations with Jesus followers throughout the years who have said, hey, if you don't know how to program, if you don't change the music, if you don't change things, then we're going to leave. But the reality is, you don't want a church that caters to your needs. What you really want is a church that invites you to participate in the mission that Jesus came into the world to introduce, which is to seek and save those people who have said no to the church and said no to Jesus. So I'm going to give you 2 really practical ways that you can be for your community and for Morton as we move forward. And here's why I think you should engage in these 2 ways. Because you will never experience what the church can do for you until you experience what the church can do through you. So the 2 ways I want you to be for Morton as we move forward is, the first way is to say yes by listening more. Have you ever noticed that often if someone has a different view or opinion to you, we can shut them down straight away? But asking great questions is one of the ways that we can show people that we're for them, to understand and learn their perspective, not always agree, but at least understand. In fact, it's one of the reasons why we still continue Beyond at Home. You're watching this because when COVID happened, what we heard people saying was, hey, I've never been to church before, but I really enjoyed engaging online and it made me want to lean in. So you're only watching this because we were able to listen and say yes by listening a little bit more. The second way that you can engage is simply say yes by engaging in the mission. You'll notice that on none of these videos do I ever push attendance. We never really focus on attendance. In fact, at Beyond, we always talk about engagement. We say, hey, there's actually 4 main ways that you can engage. You can invite, you can connect, you can serve, and you can give. And we've actually created a website for you, beyondchurch.com.au/4 FOR series. And if you go to that website, you'll discover the 4 ways that you can engage. And you can look at those and you can pick one of those ways that you can begin to lean in and say yes to people who have said no to Jesus by engaging. And I am so excited, and we are so excited to begin this For Morton campaign. And if you don't live in this region, I'd invite you to reach out to us. Send us a DM, send us an email, send us an inquiry on the website. And we would love to help you be for the region that you're in. Because I just think that something powerful happens when the local church doesn't focus on what it's against, but instead it focuses on how it's for its community, for local businesses, for schools, and for people. And when we do this, our community gets a glimpse into the fact that God is for them as well.